Welcome back to Cage by the Page. Today we're going to talk about the books that I read in May. I will not be giving a full in-depth review of these books, but I will be talking about my general thoughts. If you would like to follow my reading journey on Goodreads, it is linked below. If you would like to follow Cage by the Page's Goodreads, it is also linked below. Cage by the Page's Goodreads has the reviews of all the books that we read as a group, and my Goodreads has all of my ratings, all of my reading journey throughout the year, and you'll get to follow whether or not I get to complete my Goodreads journey, my reading journey, and my reading challenge with all of my friends through my Goodreads, and I'm hoping to up my challenge this year so that I can get to 100 books. Are we there? No. Are we close to there? Still no. But let's get into the books that I read in May. I read 4 books, but I wanted to read a lot more. Life happens. I read A Soul of Ash and Blood by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is the 5th book in the series of From Blood and Ash. And while I do plan to continue reading this series, I did not like this book, and I gave it 2 stars. I gave it 2 stars for a number of reasons, the largest reason being that it is the perspective of the male main character, Cass, from the very first book. Now, my biggest issue with this is we're 5 books in, and we're still talking about the first book. My biggest problem among all of this is that if you've read the first book, From Blood and Ash, you've already read this book. If you have read A Shadow in the Ember, you still have already read this book, just with different characters. And there's very minimal plot development and plot intrigue to keep this book going. Now, I did listen to it on audio, and I don't think that I would have finished the book if it wasn't for the fact that I listened to it on audiobook. My biggest gripe with this series is the fact that the author, Jennifer L. Armentrout, tends to lend herself to fan service. And while I think the story has a lot of potential, I think that too many times she is seeing what fans are saying and is seeing how she's going to incorporate that into the next plot. Now, whether or not she knows where these characters are going, how this book is going to end up, I don't really think that it matters all of that much, because we keep getting these fan service kinds of books. Not to mention, I felt that A Soul of Blood and Ash, right? A Soul of Ash and Blood, sorry, the titles mix me up all the time, is that it felt like a money grab. And as readers, we deserve to spend money on books that are lending themselves to a longer story, to a bigger plot line. And when you have a 5-book series, I think that you should focus on the fact that you could have a beautiful plot continuing to go without throwing in the first book by the male main character that we've already heard about already. I don't think that this book was either in the right order. If she would have made this a separate book that wasn't pertaining to the actual storyline, this is touted as book 5, and while there is some minimal plot that gets added from book 4, I feel that it would have been a much stronger book if we would have just continued the same plot line that we were working on through books 1 through 4. All that to say, I feel that if you want to know what happens, the actual plots that happen in book 5, you could realistically skip this book and just Google it, because it is the same book from the first one, just with Cass's perspective. Now, if you really like seeing how your male main characters view their partner through their lens, and it's not important to you that the plot didn't continue through book 5, then read this book, because that is what it is. But all that to say that while I will continue reading this series, mostly because of the pretty covers, because pretty covers will be my downfall. If anything will be, it'll be pretty covers. I'll include some pictures on the screen of the different covers of this book, including this book. Go on to the next book, which is a part of this series. It is the prequel series, Fire in the Flesh, which is the 3rd book. This book I gave 3 stars. There's a couple of reasons for that. I did enjoy some of this book. However, there's a plot device that happens in a lot of romance books that will almost always lend me to give it less stars. And that is when it is a romance book, when the book is really, really heavily touted as this is the main plot of the book, is the romance and where these 2 characters are going. When those 2 characters are split up through half of the book, I'm docking stars. I'm docking stars because I cannot. I hate it. It drives me crazy. I don't care how it fits into the plot. And in this case, it did fit into the plot. I don't care how it fits into the plot. I don't care how good it is. I don't care. I don't like it. I'll never like it. I will dock every single book that has it. This started back in New Moon, in middle school, when I was reading New Moon, and half of the book, spoiler if you haven't read it after, I don't even know, 15 years? I don't know when that book came out. They're separated for half the book. It drives me crazy. I hate it. Now, the other reason that I gave this book 3 stars is because it mainly focuses on the villain in this story. And while I don't have an issue with that at all, I felt that the villain fell flat. There was a lack of interest as to why they are a villain, why they interact the way that they do, and while we know some of that from earlier books, I feel that when you have the villain in almost every scene of this book, you have the opportunity to create some conflict as to whether or not this villain really is the villain, or have they grown from their villainhood, have they not grown and they're just getting worse and worse into their villainhood. I think whether the villain stays bad or stays good doesn't really matter. I think what matters is that they have character development, and as readers we deserve to see character development because that's who people are. People get to develop, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter, but let's see that development, especially when we're in 3 books, and I would say probably 75% of this book has the villain as the main antagonist, without a lot of, he's just evil to be evil, and I just don't think that is true. I think it's interesting to see how characters develop into that, and there is some commentary about kind of how he got there, but not a lot of commentary about the development through that in this specific book where he's interacting with the main character and why he hasn't seen more. I don't want to give too much away because I do want people to be able to make their own opinions on this, but for me, this book was a 3 stars, and I will continue reading the series. And once again, pretty covers. That's the crux of the issue. It is what it is. On to the next book in May, which is by a controversial taboo author that a lot of people have strong negative or positive opinions about, and her name is Penelope Douglas. Now, Penelope Douglas is well known for taboo relationships, taboo issues, writing about morally gray, morally there are no morals kind of characters. However, that's not really my issue in this book. I like dark romance. I find dark romance to be a very interesting topic. I think that even when you have morally gray or even characters that have no morals, they can still be interesting. It can still be a good book. However, this book, I realize that I haven't even talked about the title yet. It's Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. It's the first book in the Devil Knight series, and I didn't find these characters interesting at all. I didn't really care as to how they became who they are, because I felt that this book didn't know what it wanted. This book didn't know whether it wanted the male main character to be so intriguing that the female main character falls for him, or that the female main character is falling for him because of this like hard situation that they experience, and it's supposed to be enemies to lovers, and it just never comes off that way. I don't have any interest in continuing the series, and that's not to say that Penelope Douglas can't write a good book. I don't know. This is my first book by her, but this was just not for me, and I wouldn't recommend it. Now, I did give it 1 star. Why? Goodreads. Goodreads doesn't let me give it 0 stars, but if that 1 star must be earned, it has to go to the locker room scene. And finally, truly saving the best for last is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved every second of it. I listened to it on audio, and I could not put it down. It was such an interesting read. It was intense. There was moments of thriller. There was moments of increasing pressure. Now, what this book is a fictionalized version of the victim's perspective of Ted Bundy, his court case, the sensationalization. I don't know if that's a word. Doesn't matter. The sensationalism that came around his prosecution, his crime, so on and so forth. So a few things that this book does really, really well is that it really focuses on the victims. The victims are the most important people in this story, and it's told from their lens. And I think that not only is it told from their lens as victims, but it's also told from their perspective of the idea of sensationalism towards heinous crimes. Now, Ted Bundy has been sensationalized since he's been caught. He has had multiple Netflix documentaries, fictionalizations of dramatizations of his crimes, so on and so forth. There has been a lot of that. But this book, while it is that, it isn't that, because it really focuses on the victims, and it does not glorify Ted Bundy. It doesn't even mention, really, I don't think it mentions his name very much at all. I found that there was, it created intrigue through having multiple different stories happening at the same time. It really kept you engaged because there's two parallel stories that are happening, and one of them almost seems like it doesn't actually pertain to what's happening until about the middle of the book, and I found that to add to the thriller aspect. So this book is somehow a thriller, a mystery, and a true crime documentary, but through a fictional lens, inspired by real life. I think it's a really, really good book, and I think that it lends to the idea of true crime sensationalism, and it lends to through the victims' ideas and how they perceive the world around them through the court experience, through seeing this person plastered all over news media, so on and so forth. And while I am a avid watcher of many different true crime things, I found that this book really focused on victims, and I think that that was so interesting and a very different perspective on the sensationalism of true crime. I really, really recommend this book. I think that if you want something that has some thrilling aspects, if you have interest in true crime or in true crime victims and knowing about their stories, I think this book, although fictionalized, is interesting, and it's something that can keep you engaged. And yeah, I really recommend this book. It's been recommended quite a bit on Goodreads over the last year, and I don't even know if it came out this year or last year, but I do know that it was on best reads of maybe 2023 or 2024. And I just think that if you need something to read that's going to get you through, or if you want to listen to it on audio, which is what I did, I really enjoyed this book. So that wraps up all of May for me. I'll try to include some pictures of the books, their covers on the screen if you're interested in knowing some of my commentary right after I read the book. That's on Goodreads. Once again, you can follow, you can subscribe, you can comment on your books in May, how you felt about these books if you've read them at a different time. If you have any interest in reading these books, you can comment that down below. You can like and share, comment, do the things that you want to do, and we'll see you next time on Cage by the Page.